Hey everyone, I'm Stacy Spittler from Milton Union High School. I read the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It was presented in first person. The story is a collection of journal entries written by a woman whose physician's husband has confined her to the upstairs bedroom of a house he's rented for the summer. She is forbidden from working and she has to hide out in her room and she has to hide her journal from him so she can recuperate from what he calls a temporary nervous depression. It's usually a diagnosis common to women in that period. The windows of the room are barred and there's a gate across the top of the stairs, allowing her husband to control her access to the rest of the house. The story depicts the effect of confinement on the narrator's mental health and her sickness into psychosis. With nothing to stimulate her, she becomes obsessed by the pattern and color of the wallpaper. She says, "It is the strangest yellow, that wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I ever saw. Not beautiful ones like buttercups, but the old, foul, bad yellow things. But there's something else about that yellow wallpaper, the smell. The only thing I can think of that is that it is like the color of the paper, a yellow smell." Toward the end of the story, she imagines there are women creeping around behind the patterns of the wallpaper and comes to believe that she is one of them. She locks herself out in the room, and now the only place she feels safe, refusing to leave when the summer rental is up. The narrator says, "For outside, you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow, like the room. But here, I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits in that long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way." The wallpaper is very interesting. Early in the story, the narrator mentions there's a line in the wall, as if it's been rubbed off. Then later, she says her shoulder fits into it, so she's running around in circles, and that's why she's stepping over her husband. It's her path that she takes all around the room. At every point, the narrator is faced with the relationships, objects, and situations that seem innocent and natural, but they are actually quite bizarre. From the beginning, we see that the narrator is an imaginative, highly expressive woman. She remembers terrifying herself with imaginary nighttime monsters as a child, and she enjoys the notion that the house they have taken is haunted. Yet, as part of her cure, her husband forbids her to exercise her imagination in any way. Both her reason and her emotions rebel at this treatment, and she turns her imagination onto seemingly neutral objects such as the yellow wallpaper. Her negative feelings color her description of her surroundings, and she becomes fixated on the wallpaper. As the narrator sinks further into her inner fascination with the wallpaper, she becomes more dissociated from her day-to-day life. This process of dissociation begins when the story does, as well as what we thought it would. As the very moment she decides to keep her secret diary a relief of her mind, maybe a time to get away. From that point, her true thoughts are hidden from the outer world, and the narrator begins to slip into a fantasy world in which the nature of her situation makes sense. The narrator doesn't immediately understand that the yellow stains in her clothing and the long smooch on the wallpaper are connected. She fights the realization that the predicament of the woman on the wallpaper is a symbolic version of her own situation. Although at first she fails to believe it is her for a second, she attempts and she tries to tie the woman up. She thinks she's going to be able to tie the woman up. When the narrator finally identifies herself with the woman trapped in the wallpaper, she's able to see that the other women are forced to creep and hide behind the domestic patterns, she calls, of their lives, and that herself is the one in need of help. She's untangled the pattern of her life, but she has torn herself apart in getting free of it. Now she is horribly free of the constraints of her marriage, her society, and her efforts to repress her own mind. The narrator clearly depicts the story. Because of her, there wouldn't be the yellow wallpaper. We would only think of it as a room, like a baby's room or maybe a master bedroom. She makes it much more interesting. Thank you.